Okay, welcome to this first lesson of Syntax 2. In this lesson, would like to talk about things you've done in Syntax 1, so we'll revise everything you've done in Syntax 1, which means you can analyze a sentence on sentence level and name the functions and realizations. So what was syntax about again? Maybe you should pause this video for a second and think about what was syntax about. How is syntax different from something like pedagogical grammar, for example? Well, syntax is about the structure of sentences. In syntax, we look at a sentence and try and analyze it and see how it's structured. What belongs where, what belongs together, and why do we use a particular word order, for example? Parts of a bike. So if you look at a bike, you can look at the bike as a whole, but you can also take it apart and group things that belong together. For example, the wheels. You could say the wheels belong together. We have two pedals, we have a saddle, we have a frame, we have two tires, etc. So you would structure the bicycle like this, for example. The bicycle consists of a wheel, a spoke, and a spoke. And it works the same with sentences. If you look at this sentence, a new neighbor looks odd. You could analyze it and say it consists of three parts: the new neighbor, looks, and odd. Or you could even go further. In a sentence like this, people think they're more attractive when drinking alcohol. It consists of three parts: people think, and they are more attractive when drinking alcohol. And then that last part, of course, consists of of a lot of words as well. It's like a sentence on its own. So we can analyze that as well and go down and down until we come at the bottom of the sentence. A sentence and analyze it is to look at all the different words and label them. This is like taking apart a bike and look at all the different parts of the bike and label them individually. So we could look at all the individual words in a sentence and label them. For example, old then is an adjective, John is a proper noun, laughed is a verb, harshly is an adverb, etc. So we look at all the individual words and we label them separately. So another way to look at a sentence is to look at how those different words belong together to form groups, to form units. We look at this sentence again. Old John laughed harshly when he heard our stupid jokes. Old John belongs together. Laughed is one unit, harshly is a unit, and when he heard our stupid jokes is another unit. Now these groups, these units, because they constitute part of a sentence, are called constituents. And these constituents are either phrases or clauses. Old John is a phrase, laughed is a phrase, so is harshly, and when he heard our stupid jokes is a clause. We won't talk about clauses just yet, we'll talk about phrases only for the moment. But how can you know what kind of phrase something is? How do you know what label to attach to a particular phrase? Of course, not all phrases are the same. We can give them different names. Now, I'd like you to pause this video and think about that question. How can you know what kind of phrase something is? How can you label a phrase? Well, the answer is this. We try and find the head. We find the head. The head is the most important word in a phrase. If you know the most important word, then you know what kind of phrase something is. So if you look at that sentence again, old John laughed harshly when he heard our stupid jokes. Old John is a phrase which consists of two words, old and John. Now, we sort of should intuitively know that John is more important than old. The phrase is not about old, we're talking about John. We leave out John, it doesn't make sense anymore. We leave out old, the sentence still makes sense. So we know John is the most important word in that phrase. It's a noun, and so we say it's a noun phrase. Same goes for laughed, which is a verb phrase because there's only one word in that phrase, and of course that must be the most important word, that must be the head. So we say laughed is a verb phrase. So let's look at this phrase here, the hungry cat, in the sentence the hungry cat ate John's goldfish. What's the head here? Of course, we're not talking about not hungry, but talking about a cat. So cat is the most important word, it's a head. So cat is a noun, so we're talking about a noun phrase. This is a noun phrase. The cat was extremely hungry. What's the most important word in this phrase? Is it extremely? Are we talking about extremely? The cat was extremely, or the cat was hungry? Because the first thing doesn't make sense, so we're talking about hungry. Hungry is an adjective, and so this is an adjective phrase. Fish was eaten rather quickly. This one isn't difficult. It consists of two adverbs, so it must be an adverb phrase. John was going to cry. This one isn't difficult either, because it only consists of verbs, with the exception of two. So it must be a verb phrase. John cried beside the goldfish bowl. Now this one is slightly tricky. You might remember from syntax 1 that anything that starts with the preposition, like beside, any phrase that starts with a preposition is a preposition phrase. So beside the goldfish bowl, because it starts with a preposition, is a preposition phrase. So you shouldn't be misled when you look at a preposition phrase, because it's very easy to think the head, the most important word here, is bowl, in goldfish bowl, and therefore it's a noun phrase. It isn't, because it starts with a preposition, this phrase is a preposition phrase. And we'll see later that this preposition phrase actually contains a noun phrase. So it's a preposition phrase, and within the preposition phrase is a noun phrase. But for now we'll just call it a preposition phrase, which it is. Then how do you know that something is a phrase? How do you know that something is a constituent? How do you know that certain words belong together? You can't always trust your intuition there. So if you're in doubt, one very helpful thing to do is to apply the substitution test. So if something is a noun phrase, you should always be able to replace it by a pronoun. If something is a preposition phrase, you should always be able to replace it by either there, then, here, and that kind of word. Adjective phrase can be replaced by an adjective, adverb phrases by adverbs, and verb phrases by verbs. So if you can replace one set of words with a pronoun, then it must be a noun phrase. If there's one set of words that you can replace it with there, then, and here, it'll probably be a preposition phrase, etc. So if you're in doubt, just apply the substitution test. Right, having said that, look at this sentence. Had lost most of his teeth, old John. Here, the words that belong together in a sentence are grouped together, right? Had lost belong together, most of his teeth belong together, and old John belong together. Yet this sentence is wrong, of course, you know that, and that's because the asterisk is at the beginning. You intuitively know that this sentence is wrong, because the word order is wrong. But how do we know that the word order is wrong? We all know this sentence should start with old John, of course, but how do you know it should start with old John? How do you intuitively know? Why is that you intuitively know that this sentence should start with old John? Pause this video for a second and think about that question. Well, the answer is, because this sentence consists of constituents, and all the constituents are okay in this sentence. I mean, the words that belong together are grouped together, but constituents also have a function. which defines their position in a sentence. Old John is a constituent which functions as a subject. The subject is the part of the sentence that tells who does the action, or what does the action in most cases. So that should always go at the beginning in English. So Old John here functions as the subject and therefore should go at the beginning. Had lost is the predicator, and that defines his position as well. Most of his teeth functions as a direct object, which means it should come after the predicator and the subject in the sentence. And it's very important to distinguish between functions and realizations. Now this may sound difficult, but it's not that difficult at all. You just have to realize what the difference is. So constituents have a function and they're realized by phrases in many cases, but can also be realized by clauses. Old John, for example, is a noun phrase which functions as a subject. So we say the subject Old John is realized by a noun phrase. You could also say the function is what it does, and the realization is what it's made of. So we can say a subject is made of a noun phrase. It's like looking at the bike again. You can look at a particular part and for example, the tires. The tires have a particular function, because if you have no tire, it becomes really difficult to ride your bike. And it's made of rubber, for example. Yeah? So that's its realization. Or if you look at your body parts, for example, so a leg. A leg is used for walking, and its realization is the leg. So the function is something to walk with, and the realization is the leg. So here the function is a subject, the realization is a noun phrase. It's made of a noun phrase. And as you can see, a noun phrase can have different functions. A noun phrase, which is the material, what it's made of, can function as a subject, or function as a direct object. So we say here we have two noun phrases. One functions as a subject, and the other one functions as a direct object. To conclude this, part, here are 3 sentences. Pause this video for a moment and look at these sentences and see if you can find the constituents and label the functions and realizations. And here are the answers. Recently my elder sister has been travelling around Australia. Recently here is an adverbial which functions is an adverbial which is realized by an adverb phrase. So the function is adverbial, realization is adverb phrase. It's made of an adverb phrase. Recently is an adverb. It's the only word in the phrase, so it must be an adverb phrase. By the way, you should be careful to distinguish between adverbials and adverbs. Adverbs are realizations, adverbials are functions. So don't talk about adverbial phrases. That's very confusing. Adverbial is a function, adverb phrase is a realization. My elder sister is a subject, which is realized by a noun phrase. Has been travelling is a predicator, which is realized by a verb phrase. Has two parts in each sentence, which should be relatively easy to find, which are the predicators and the subjects. So if you're analyzing a sentence and you want to label the functions and realizations, then it might be helpful to just start with the predicator and then the subject. The predicator is always a verb phrase and the subject is always a noun phrase. Around Australia is also an adverbial, just like recently, but this adverbial is a prepositional phrase because it starts with around, and as I said, any phrase that starts with a preposition is a preposition phrase. Second sentence, after 2 months of deep snow and terrible cold, we grew impatient. Now don't be misled by the long first part in this sentence. This entire part, after 2 months of deep snow and terrible cold, is an adverbial. and it's realized by a preposition phrase. Now this whole thing is one constituent. If you were in doubt, you could have applied the substitution test, and if you can replace it by there or then or here or words like that, it must be a preposition phrase. So here, after 2 months of deep snow and terrible cold, we grew impatient. You can say then we grew impatient. So you know this is probably a preposition phrase, and it is. It's an adverbial realized by a preposition phrase. We, again, a subject realized by a noun phrase. Grew is a predicator realized by a verb phrase. Impatient is a subject attribute realized by an adjective phrase. Remember, the subject attribute is an attribute of the subject. Attribute in Dutch is eigenschap, so it says something about the subject we. A subject attribute can only appear in sentences with a copula. Grew here is a copula. A copula is a verb that you can replace by an equal sign, by is, or by a form of be. So in this case you could also say we were impatient. That's fine. So grew is a copula, so you know you're dealing with a subject attribute after the copula. And in this case, a subject attribute realized by an adjective phrase. My teachers regularly explained the grammar rules to me and my classmates. My teachers is subject, realized by a noun phrase. So that's a mistake here. It says P, should be NP. My teachers is a subject, realized by a noun phrase. Regularly, adverbial, realized by adverb phrase. Explain, predicator, realized by a verb phrase. The grammar rules, direct object, realized by a noun phrase. And to me and my classmates is an indirect object. Remember, indirect object is to whom, to something. The grammar rules were explained to me and my classmates, and so this is an indirect object realized by a preposition phrase because the phrase starts with the preposition to. Well, that's it for this lesson. If you need more practice, if you still find this difficult, then make sure you revise everything from Syntax 1, because this is really just repetition from Syntax 1. So it could be helpful for you to try and find an old practice exam for Syntax 1 and do the first exercise and analyze the sentences, find the functions and realizations.